Hey guys, welcome to the live stream. My name's Tensor. Today we're going to be looking at these two libraries. Got a library here called Functional Widget, which is pretty interesting, and came across it the other day. I thought it would be interesting to kind of take an example that we've already used and kind of rebuild it with this particular library. And then the other one that kind of goes with it is this Flutter Hooks library, which is a state management library that's sort of similar to React hooks. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. I haven't really looked at the documentation here, so again, this is going to be a case of me learning the stuff on stream and then applying it. So can you guys see this? Everything's live, everything's working. Because people are still going on about the urination that happened before the stream started. Just wondering. All right. Well, while you guys think about that, I'm going to transition over to the emulator, or not the emulator, the editor, and we'll get going here. I've got this little chat overlay. If it gets annoying, let me know and I'll turn it off. I'll explain what hooks do here in a moment, but I just kind of want to get this started. All right, so for right now, I'm just going to actually delete everything in this page. And we're actually going to go back to the browser and we're going to go pick a project that we're going to do. I'm thinking we do something with animations. So let's go back over there and take a look at some of my repositories. Let's see. Language Dart. Oh yeah, by the way, I made a repository for this. It's in the description, and I'll go ahead and link it in the chat. If you guys want to follow along. All right, let's see. I am thinking that we should do, where is it? I'm not seeing it. This thing, a dragger example. We should rebuild this with the hooks and with these functional widgets. And then we should move on to the other one would be the timer example. So I think we should build these two. Both of them are animation heavy, and both of them have a lot of interesting and sort of coupled state, and I think they'll be good examples of how like hooks can decouple the state and how we can kind of clean up the code with these functions. Let's go back to the dragger, and that's what we'll start with here. All right, so here's the actual code from the project that I wrote. For the most part, I'm just going to ignore all of this for now. I mean, I'm gonna follow this pattern, but you'll see how it's completely different here in a moment. So first I need to kind of explain about this library so that you guys get what's going on. So the idea behind this functional widget library was to take the functions, which are now classes that obviously inherit from either stateless widget or stateful widget or inherited widget, or whatever widget type, and turn them into functions like this. And in the background, there's some code generation that's happening, which actually just builds out the boilerplate for a stateless widget or a hooked widget or a stateful widget, whatever. And you can specify that using some annotations. You can see here he's got @widget up here, and then that generates some code for this widget foo, and calling the function then calls this code. Then Flutter Hooks. Now hooks are interesting. If you guys come from the React world, you may have an idea of what hooks do. The basic idea here is with a stateful widget, you've got a state object. Well, with a hooked widget, you've got multiple, I guess, state objects, though they're called hooks and they sit inside of a list. And so the idea is that you can have all of these different pieces of state, and then you can automatically recall the pieces of state and call those objects back to your hooked widget, which is kind of cool. And of course, you can have various different things. There are a bunch of different presets that you can use. There's just a basic state object, stream object, a future object, and a few other cool things. And there are objects specifically for animations as well. And he's got a whole explanation as to why this is an interesting way to do things and why this works in principle. And here's the actual implementation of a hook. So you can see it extends an element, and as we know, the element is actually on the back of the widget. So it's sort of on the back end of every widget that you build out inside of Flutter. All right, so let me read the chat real quick. So Rollie wants me to remove the chat overlay, and Adam likes my job. As a beginner coder, you think it's good to start learning Flutter directly? Yeah, you can go ahead and just learn Dart and Flutter directly without needing to learn front-end development first. Sukabir, is that how you say it? I know I'm butchering your name. He wants to make a video processing lib in Flutter. Well, I do have a few ideas, but take a long time to explain them right this moment. Moshk, the coding session will be about an hour and a half, so or at least however long it takes for me to build out these two projects, really. So it might go over an hour and a half like the last time. All right, so let's get into the actual coding now. So let's go and get our dependencies. And for this, we're going to need quite a few dependencies. So we'll need functional widget, and actually this goes in dev dependencies. Let's see, he's actually got our whole thing here. Just paste that in there, and then there's this other library here called Functional Widget Annotation, which we put right in there as a dependency, direct dependency. Well, that's annoying. All right, so I'm going to take the versions off of these libraries and just have the pub tool automatically resolve all the versions. just by adding this any keyword. This is probably not a good idea as far as the long term goes, but just for the stream, it's what I'm going to have to do to make this work. And we're also going to need, of course, the Flutter Hooks library, so let's grab that too. And I think I can keep the version on this one without it having an issue. Yeah, alright, seems to have worked. Okay, so for the first app that we're building here, we're building this sort of dragger app. It has 3 drag boxes at the top of the screen, and then you can drag them to the bottom, and they move the color from the actual dragger box to the target. So that's the idea, at least. Let's make our imports. So we're going to need Flutter Hooks. We're going to need Functional Widget annotation. Yeah. And I think we're also going to need, I think that should be fine for now. We're also going to have to say that this is part of main.g.dart because we're going to be generating code here. And we're going to be essentially cloning, or rather making a second part of the main file, and then we want to be able to reference the stuff that gets generated in. Alright, so to define a widget with this functional widget library, we can just call this functional widget annotation, and then we can create a function underneath, and I'm going to just call it my app, and it'll take in nothing. And then it will return a material app, and we can then, of course, build out like a normal build function right here. And let's see. I also need to specify the widget type here. And we can choose between, right now, we can choose between hook type and stateless widget type. We'll go for a stateless widget right now. I think it's just stateless, not stateless widget. Yeah. I don't know why it's throwing an error. And then, let's see, let me open up the terminal real quick. Run our build command. See if this generates the code properly. So I've opened up the terminal down here. I don't know if you guys can see that very well. And I'm going to run flutter packages pub run BuildRunner watch. And what this will do is it will execute the BuildRunner tool, and then it will watch the file for changes. So every single time I save it, will generate the code behind scenes in a file called main.g.dart. Let's let that run. While I'm doing that, read the chat. Well, what do I think about scoped model? DMA is your name. I think it's cool for smaller projects. It can be a pretty powerful way to build things. It's the sort of state management method that was explained heavily in the documentation. It's used in the Fuchsia OS repository. The issue I have with it is that it doesn't really get updated because it has just been pulled directly from a repository. And yeah, so that can be a bit of a downside. Alright, so Drew Williams says that my noise gate is a little bit too high, so I should turn down the threshold. Let me see. Sorry guys, this will take a second. I'd rather give you guys a decent stream than which threshold, close or open? Whatever, I'll open both of them a little. Alright, is that a little better? I'm hoping. Alright. Yes, Mixerator, you can upload the video with the comments running on the side on the YouTube UI. Though, last time I tried to, it just didn't work out. And I've got this, I've got the overlay here, but I'm going to turn it off when I start to do heavy coding. It's really just for my benefit and for the benefit of people watching the video later, so that they can see which questions I'm answering. So if you type in any for a plugged-in version, how do you find out which versions were fetched? You can check inside of the pubspec lock file, and then you can search out the actual packages. So I wanted to see Flutter, or what was it? Not Flutter Hooks, Functional Widget. You can see here it says version 0.5.0. That's the one that was fetched in this case. Alright, so this looks like it's built. And close the window here. You can see here we have this tiny little class that was generated on the back end called MyApp. It's a stateless widget. It's got some boilerplate here, and it's got the build function, which just passes in context and then calls the MyApp function that we generated in, or that we created over here. So it sort of connects the two, which is kind of cool. I'll explain what I think about hooks compared to block as I continue to use it. I don't really have that much, well, I've never really used hooks. Let's just say that. Alright. Let me turn off the chat overlay. Sorry about that, guys. And then let's really get into this. So we're going to need, of course, our scaffold. And then what I'm going to do is just have the body here, and I'll make a function called app with the body. I'll make another functional, copy it from here, another functional widget type, and this one will be a hook. You can actually use a annotation called hWidget for hooks, and it's all a lowercase. So I can just say widget app, and then return. We're going to return a stack here. This is actually directly from code. I've got it in the background. I'm kind of reading off of it. So directly from the code of the original app, and I'm just kind of converting it into the code that we're writing right now. So as you can see here, along with our MyApp stateless widget, we now have this hooked widget, which is kind of cool. And if I was to run this in the emulator, I think it would show up without an issue. Let me see. Let me show you guys if the emulator turned off. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it's an empty page because there's nothing going on, but yeah, it's working like a normal Flutter app. All right, so in the stack, we have the 3 drag boxes, and we need to create these Dragbox widgets. So we need to create a function called Dragbox, which will then be able to be dragged around. This will be another hooked widget, so hooked widget. this function takes in a few, it should take in a few variables. So we need to pass in an offset, which we'll call the initial position. We need to pass in a string called label, and we'll pass in a color. I'll call this item color. And I'm getting all this information if I pop over to the Dragbox repository. I'll show you what the actual widget looks like from the original example. So here's the Dragbox, and what I'm doing with the function is I'm passing in all of these here, which are just final variables in the original implementation. And so I'm passing them into the new function, and then I'm just going to manipulate the state inside of the function in a way that's very similar to what's going on in here, except I'm going to be using the hooks instead of a stateful. Alright, so if I save this, it should go ahead and build, yeah, there we go, Dragbox. And as you can see here, it's got the 3 different arguments that we added to the function inside of it. And this will return a position. And actually, let's add some state here. So I'm going to create some state. I'm going to say final position equals use state. And this is a function from the hooks library. So when I call use state, what it does is it creates a hook that's specifically made to manage some kind of basic state object. And in this case, it's just a basic variable for our init position. This should be init pose, not init post. So we're just tracking the change of this variable, and as this variable changes, it will update this function, and that's how it works. So, and of course, you could do this with streams and futures and all different other types of objects as well. All right, so to access the value in this use state, this makes what's called a value notifier. You get the value, the actual offset, just call position.value, and we need to use this to sort of track the box as it's being dragged around. So we'll put it in this position here as the left and the top. So dx is left and top is y. Then inside of this we have our draggable. We want to add the data, which will be item color. So this is the data that's being passed from the draggable to the target, the color. Then we'll create a container, which will be the actual box itself, have it a width and height of 100 pixels, and then we'll give it the color that we want to pass along. And so we'll have a center here, and then we'll have some text as well. We'll pass in the label that we're passing in up here. And then as far as logic goes, we need to create an onDraggable canceled function here. So this takes in the velocity and then the offset. So this is if the item's being dragged along and it gets canceled, meaning it gets released, then it tracks the velocity and then the current offset. And all we need to do is just take position.value and set it into offset like this. And then that will automatically bounce the box back to its original. And then we can create a feedback, which is essentially what the container looks like when it's being dragged along. So this is just going to be kind of a opaque container with width and height that are slightly larger than the original box, 120 pixels. And then the color, we can just take the item color and add a opacity to it. So I'll say 0.5. Still have a center. Copy this. Oops. Like that. And let's see, this shouldn't show up yet on our screen. Like if I open the emulator, it'll be still empty because we haven't defined the offsets. So now inside of the stack, I can call Dragbox, which is this widget that we just created, and I can pass in the different values. So let's pass in an offset of 0 and 0. Pass in text, so I'll just call box 1. A color, let's just color blue. Yeah. And these are all values from the original tutorial. Then we need 2 more of these, thinking. So this one will be 150 and then 00, and then the other one will be 300. That way they're somewhat even across the screen. We could actually get the screen width and then divide it into. This should be alright. This one will be box 2, and then this one will be box 3. Then let's change the colors here. So this one will be orange, and this one will be light green. And let me open up the emulator here, and that's how it looks right now. And as you can see, I can actually drag these boxes around, and when I let go of them, they just kind of sit at the bottom. Kind of cool. Obviously, we could add some styling to clean up like the letters, text, but I'm not really concerned about that right now. All right, let's take a look at the chat here. What are you guys saying? Yeah, I do say, as you can see, quite a lot. Sorry about that. Oh, Remy's here. He's the guy who actually wrote both of these libraries. All right, what's been going on? There's been a lot of chatter here. Oh, God. I did not change the active screen, did I? Sorry, guys. Wow. That was a real blunder. Alright, yeah. Yeah, I got it. I'll go back over the code so you guys can actually see it. So, my as you can see will actually be legit here. Alright, so while you guys were gone, I was actually building this here, this Dragbox widget. So, got 3 of them here, and you can now see them in the emulator. We can drag them around like this. And then, so these are all based on this function down here, which uses the hooks. So we create a state object essentially using this use state function. So this just tracks the changes for this initial position variable, or rather this position variable. And we use the initial position as the initial value for the variable. Let me go ahead and reset the app so that you guys can see what it looks like initially. These boxes should go back to the top, or it should just crash on me. While that's loading up, I'll go over the rest of this. So then we got the positioned here, and each of the boxes has a left and top value, and this is how we know where the box is at a current given moment. And then we've got the draggable. The draggable is, of course, the widget that allows it to drag around. and we define what we want to essentially transfer from the drag box to the target, which is the color of the box. So we define that in this data here. And you could put anything in here. You could put like a string, you could put in a huge object, you could put in whatever you want. Then we've got a container inside of it to actually visually show the drag box. So width and height of 100 pixels, color of item color, which is being passed into the function up here, and then the center with the text and the label is also being passed in through. Then down here we've got a function on the draggable, and this is what happens when the draggable is canceled. We just take the position value and set it equal to the new offset so that the box moves around the screen. And then we've got a feedback here, and this is what the container looks like as it's being dragged. So it gets a little bit larger, it has a little bit of opacity in its background, and then I've just left the text alone. But I'm sure you guys saw that it kind of went red as I was dragging it. I'll show you here again. It goes red and has some underlines. And we could fix that, but I'm not really concerned about that right now. Am I screwing up again, or no, it looks like everything's all right. I can actually see the stream myself. All right, so what's from line 15? What's the matter with line 15? I guess I didn't. All right, so I guess I didn't really talk about the app widget. So up here we've got a stack, and this is where we're defining all these drag boxes. That's all that's really going on with this stack. This is a hooked widget too, and the reason we want it to be a hooked widget is because we want some state inside of this app widget as well. And here are the two widgets that were generated in the background. So Dragbox has the 3 arguments inside of it, an offset, a string, and a color. And then app currently has no internal state at the moment. All right, so the state that we want to contain here is the color, the color that we're going to catch from the drag boxes. Dragging these boxes to the target will give us a color, and that will be the state that we want. So we'll call this final caught color, and then we'll use the use state again. Oh, by the way, here you can see here they use animation controller, use context, use future, use listenable, and so on. And there are quite a few different default values that you can inside of these hooks widgets. So use state, and for now we'll make the colors white by default. So the drag target, and this should be colors, not color. The drag target by default will be white, and then as we drag a color to it, say blue or orange or light green, it will change the color. So now below, or is it in the stack? I think in the stack, we need to define a position. Let's give it, we'll make it left 100 pixels, and then bottom 0.0 pixels. So it will be from the left 100 pixels and from the bottom 0 pixels. So it'll sit right on the bottom of the screen. And then the child of this will be the actual target. And in here, we want to define an onAccept function. So we're going to get our color coming through. So we need to deal with that color. Say caught color.value. And while you guys weren't able to see the screen, I was mentioning how you can get the value from one of these objects, these hooks, by calling value on variable, because these are value notifier variables. See here, that's the actual type. So you need to be able to unwrap it from that value notifier. So that's what I'm doing here. Calling caught color.value, Then I can set that equal color. Now it should change in response to the drag box being dragged into the drag target. So we also need to create a builder. This takes in context, so the build context, and then it has a list of accepted items and then a list of rejected items. Honestly, we don't really care about any of that except for the accepted item. We'll return a container, and this will be the actual visual drag box itself, or drag target rather. We give it a width of 200.0 and then a height of 200.0. We'll give it some decoration because we want it to have the color. Sorry. All right, so we want to check to see if accept is empty, the list accept. If it is, then we'll use color value. And if it isn't, then we'll use colors gray shade 100. So by default, this will have a color gray shade. And this shouldn't be in decoration directly. We need a box decoration here. The color of that will be this gray shade. Let's see, it's not showing up in the emulator because I probably need to reset it. Then add a center down here, and then we'll add some text here. It just says drag here. And there we go. So it's actually showing up now. I'll reset it and see if I can get the boxes at the top of the screen. Now we can grab them and just kind of drag them on top of this, and you can see that the color transfers over. Pretty cool. So overall, I'd say that the widget part of this app, writing everything in functions like this, it's sort of intuitive, but at the same time, it's sort of like a syntactic sugar sitting on top of everything. And I guess it could be a little confusing if you don't really know what you're doing. For now, it's a bit novel. I guess if you could make the widgets into actual functions, that would be pretty cool. But because we have to call them from the classes rather than the functions, it's not really like writing functions. But I think it's kind of cool, at least as a novel idea for now. As far as hooks though go, it definitely does clean up the state, which is, I think, what it's supposed to do. Okay, so let's hear what you guys are saying. Yeah, I could wrap the feedback in a material to get rid of the text area, or error rather. Let's do that real quick. Wrap with new widget, material, and yeah, there we go. So good catch there, ACOS. All right, so this is a fairly basic project. Let's move on to the more advanced project. So what I'm going to do is just take this project and I'm going to make a new file here called Draggable. And I'm going to put this in it. And then I'll just rename this here. Let it generate a draggable.g.dart file for this code. And then I'll commit it over to GitHub, if it will. I don't see why it shouldn't. Looks like this is working. Maybe I need to So this command that I'm running, if in case you guys don't know, there's a library called BuildRunner, and BuildRunner is what handles all the code generation in most of the code generation libraries for Dart. And just by running watch, it basically watches for the changes in these files, and then it builds them based on this dependency graph and all these various different steps that you can see down. So let's see. So now it's actually generated this code. Looks like Draggable has resolved. So now we can go back into main and just delete everything. And if you guys want to, function, if you guys want to play around with this draggable application, you can. So I'll just commit everything to GitHub. We'll just, so I need to stage these two. I'll push it up to the repository. Excuse me. Now let's see. Rollie says that he's tried to use Hook Widget as a child of tab bar view. Got an error regarding keep alive. If Remy's in the chat, he might know more about that. I certainly don't. I've never tried to embed a Hook Widget into tab bar view. I will say that from what I understand, both of these libraries are in very early development. That's why I chose to do them on this live stream rather than as traditional tutorials. I definitely will do traditional tutorials, especially on Flutter Hooks, as it becomes more mature, because it certainly seems like an interesting library. But for now, I think this should suffice. All right, so let me. I'm going to go back to the browser. This time, we will go back to the actual development window. I'll make sure that that actually does happen. And what we're looking for here is the timer example. And so the timer example is this like animation, and it essentially what it does is it counts down from a duration, and I think the default duration is 10 seconds. Yeah, 10 seconds. It counts down from this 10-second duration, and it basically is this big old circle. It uses this like paint, this custom painter that we defined down here to kind of animate this circle as it like counts down through the duration. So what I want to do is rebuild this with Functional Widget and with Flutter Hooks, but I also want to expand on it and add some the ability to essentially add more to the duration so that people could set like a longer time, and then maybe add more buttons, like a button to reset the animation and a button to pause the animation. So I'm going to actually completely reuse this timer painter without changing it. So I'll just copy it out of the repository here, put it into our code. And I think normally, okay, let's go back. All right, so I think normally what you would want to do with something like this is put it in its own file, because obviously it's just a normal class with a custom painter. But you know what, I can't be bothered with that right now, so I'll just leave it in the main.dart file. And actually, I probably shouldn't have deleted the top widget that we had before, but you know what, I can rewrite it real quick. let's see. We'll create a function here called myApp. And there's my auto completion for functional widget finally. So we've got functional widget type hook and stateless mentioned before. That in there, and then we can say widget myApp like this, make a function, then return a material app. And for this one, we're going to have some theme data. Theme data. That's one thing that I think is a little strange about this way of running things too. You don't have direct access to the context because it's all on the back end. That makes passing around theme data and pushing pages and stuff like that a little bit more difficult. I guess you could pass them into the functions as arguments, but that seems a little redundant. So if Remy's still in the chat and if he could figure out how to resolve this issue, that would be pretty cool. I think this library might be much more powerful in that case. So I'm going to use the theme that we had from before. So just the canvas color is going to be a blue-gray. I'll have like an icon. Make these colors white. An accent color. The accent will be pink accent and have a brightness of bright dark. Then home here, I'll have a scaffold. I'll have a body we'll call timer counter, or timer column rather. For this, we're going to create another function. This will be a H widget, so a hook widget. Another thing to notice is, of course, the name of the functions here. The first letter of the function gets capitalized, and that becomes the name of the class. So this is myApp, so then it'll appear as myApp like this when it's generated. So timer column will be generated as capital timer column. Let's let this generate, and you can see we've got the myApps class and then timer column class back here. So Remy says just add it as an argument, the generator will kick in. So will it actually take away the underscore for the context? I'll have to check that here in a moment when I actually get to some place where I want to use the context. All right, so for this timer column, the state that we want to define is seconds and minutes. These will again be use states. You know, probably be better to define some kind of complex object, but yeah, whatever, no big deal. And both of these will be doubles, and we'll be essentially taking these doubles and then inserting them into the duration. I'm thinking that the overall amount of duration that we can add will be about 10 minutes, 10, 11 minutes. Be able to add 60 seconds up to 60 seconds and up to 10 minutes. So that'll be 11 minutes. And then we also need to create a animation controller, which we'll call timer controller. And we can do that with Flutter Hooks by using use animation controller. Then we can pass in the duration here. So duration. Then we just pass in our minutes and seconds. These are both state items, and they're also both doubles, so we need to convert them into integers. There's a reason why I define them as doubles, and you'll see why here. Right, so it should look like that. And then now we can return a column here at the top level. And inside of the column, we'll have an expand. This will have a widget called timer, which will be the actual timer itself. And I don't know why I'm putting a semicolon there. This will take in the timer controller. We're going to actually pass this along through the function that we'll create for a timer. And then below it, we'll have a text. We'll say minutes. So this is just a what's it called? A little tag that we're going to put over like a slider, and the slider will allow you to select between 0 and 10 minutes to add to the timer. We'll create that slider here, and the value here will be our minutes value. So that's why we made the minutes a double, because sliders only accept doubles like this. Then we can define the min, which would be 0, 0, and then the max, which could be 10, 0. And then we need to define an onChanged, and this will take the value and then change it. I guess we need to check to see if the timer controller is animating, so that we don't accidentally change. And actually, we need to see if it's not animating. So is false, like that. And the reason we want to do this is so that the user can't actually slide the slider if the animation is running. So minutes.value equals value. This allows us to slide the slider. And then if this comes back as false, meaning it is animating, then we can't slide the slider. Let's give this discrete division, so it'll have 10 divisions because it's from 0 to 10. Then we'll have label down here, and then the label will pop as you're moving it, so you can see the values that you're selecting. Minutes.value, this will be string, because I think it takes a string, yeah. I should probably take the emulator off the screen because it's just throwing errors, and it will continue to throw errors until we've actually resolved everything. So Botan Abdullah says hello, and I say hello back. Okay. So we've got our minutes. We also want to make a slider for seconds. So I'm just going to take and copy this here of the text and the slider, and we'll change this to seconds. And the slider for this one will be seconds value. It'll be from 0 to 60 rather than 10. Again, we'll check to see if whether or not we're animating, and if we are, then we can change the seconds value. Otherwise, we can't. And then for this one, we want to have 60 divisions, and we want to display the seconds value to. So now let's create our timer widget. Our widget type, functional widget type. This will be a stateless widget. We don't really need state for it. Widget will be, function will be called timer. And we want to pass in the animation controller, which we called, I think, timer controller. and we'll return a column. So we've got a column inside of a column. And let's see. Inside of the children here, we'll have an expanded. And we'll have an align that we can put in the center. And we'll set that alignment to fractional offset center. All this is part of the original code. I'm just kind of copying it over, but there are a few things here. Well, as you notice, there are a lot of things that I'm writing here on the fly as well. It is pretty intuitive to actually use this library. It's much more intuitive than I expected it to be. To convert a widget into a function in this way. So then we'll have a stack inside of this aspect ratio here and this line too. And the stack here is what's going to have the actual circle, which is the timer, and then the timer text, which will be like a countdown clock, essentially. So stack children in the stack will be a position.fill so that it actually fills that area. Inside of this position filled, positioned, not position. We'll have our child, which will be called timer builder. And again, we'll pass the controller down here. So we are not actually using the timer controller in this timer widget. We're going to use it in these two widgets though. Timer builder and then timer text. Create another text, pass in the controller as well. So we can access this controller directly and then animate the text and animate the actual circle. Matthew, so I've kind of put a description here, but I'll go over it again. I didn't really, I mean, I can really explain it pretty quickly. We're just looking at two libraries. One of them is called Functional Widget, and then the other one's called Flutter Hooks. Flutter Hooks is a bit like React Hooks. It allows us to create these hook widgets. You can see here I've got a few of them. Timer column extends hook widget, and it's essentially a replacement for the stateful widget that exists in the Flutter framework, where the stateful widget would have like a normal just state object attached to it. The hook widget can have multiple of these, and they can be different kinds. So you could attach like a stream to it or attach like a variable to it, and then have it track the change of these values over time, and then it'll rebuild based on what happens with the values. And then the functional widget library allows us to essentially define widgets as functions like this. You can see here I've got this annotation. This is building out a stateless widget. And so we've defined this function that takes in an animation controller called timer. And what this does is it goes and it generates all of the boilerplate to make the class and the stateless widget back here. And then we can refer to that inside of our code. It's kind of like in a way, it's sort of like a syntactic sugar that's sitting on top of Flutter. It's interesting, to say the least, but I'd say that the practical applications are not there yet, because it's a fairly immature library at the moment. But it's a cool idea for sure. All right, so let's continue here. See. You guys didn't miss that much. I did write one app already. But what we're essentially doing is rewriting apps that already exist. So these are apps that I've already written, already done tutorials on. This one currently is the animated timer that I did a while back. It's sort of like a circle that paints itself as the timer is counting down. And I thought it'd be a good example because it's got all this animation going on. And I'm going to show you how Hooks handles animation control, stuff like that. Alrighty, so we need to build these two functions here, or two widgets rather, timer builder and timer text. So widget, timer builder, and this one will take in the timer controller again. So let's go ahead and grab that here, copy it and paste it in. Another widget, timer text. And we need to annotate these, of course. I'm not really sure what they should be yet. I think they're both hooks. No, actually, I can make them both. I think I can make them both stateless. So, or at least I can make the timer text stateless. So let's do that. So I can say functional widget like this. Add the annotation, and this allows me to define the widget type. And there are also other properties here too that we could define. There's a debug fill properties. We could choose if we want to have debug properties attached to this widget. And then there's also this equality thing, which allows us to set up the equality operator for the various different ways. Now, I'm not really worried about all that right now. We're not really doing that kind of stuff with our application. So functional widget type, this will be a stateless one. Why is this throwing? Oh, brackets. And then for this one, this will be a H widget, which is a hook widget. It's just a functional widget, widget type, functional widget type hook instead of stateless. But this is just a, I guess, an alias for that. So you don't have to write out this entire annotation. And our generator should have generated the two. So we've got builder, our timer builder, and then timer text here. One being a hook and the other one being a stateless widget. We've got a few errors here. Ah, okay. I need to bring in the math library real quick. For our painter, and we need to alias this as math. And that should get rid of those errors. Let's see if I rebuild this, does it actually show anything on the emulator? Or is it still errors? Yeah, no, it's throwing errors because it's returning null for these build functions. So let me add the outer widgets here, and then I'll show you guys the emulator, see what's being built here. I'm just going to return containers, these two, right now, just so that you guys can see what's happening here. Alright, so let me pop the emulator into view. There we go. So you can see we've got our sliders here, and we can slide them along. And so for minutes, we've got this nice little value at the top. They can slide between 0 and 0 and 10.0. And then for seconds, we can slide between 0.0 and 60 seconds. So this is our way of setting the timer. And yeah, it'll also set the text here inside of our text builder. All right, so let's start with the text builder. So in here, we want to create an animated builder instead of a container. We'll have our animation, which will be our timer controller. And then the builder takes the context and the child widget that we want to animate. And this is the timer builder, not the timer text. We're returning our custom painter, which is just called custom paint. And in here, we have our painter, rather, is called timer painter. The custom painter is the custom painter widget that we're using. And we need to define the animation in here, so we pass in timer controller. Then our background color, which will be colors white. And then a color in here, and I can call theme of context indicator color, and that seems to work inside of the builder. We have the context here. Let's see if this shows up. So there we have our circle. This circle will fill up as we are counting down the timer. Let's put the text in the middle of it here. And we'll do that with this timer text widget. Instead of a container, we'll return an align. The alignment of which will be fractional offset. Should be centered. Not too many F's. And here we'll have a column. We'll have text that will say count down inside of the column. And then we'll have a animated builder in here. And actually, we could probably take this timer builder and turn it into a stateless widget rather than a hooked widget, because we don't actually have any state directly associated with. Let's do that. I'm just going to grab this here, copy it, and paste it here. So we'll convert this back to a stateless. Let me hide the emulator because we're getting that error. That's mainly happening because the animated builder doesn't have the build function. So let's give it one. Need to specify the animation controller, timer controller, then our builder, which takes in the context and the child, or returns the context, takes in, yeah. And we want to define the duration, which will be timer controller times 1.0 minus our timer controller.value, and this should be timer controller.duration. So as our timer is counting upwards, or rather downwards, actually, as the counter is counting upwards, say we have 10 seconds on the duration, the value will start at 0.0, and it goes all the way up to 1.0 when the animation ends. So we subtract it from 1.0, and then what we can do is essentially just get the value of the timer as it's counting down, and that's why we're subtracting it from 1.0 like this, so that we get the input. So it'll count down, it'll be like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, rather than counting up from 0 all the way up to 10. So then for this, we'll return our text, and in here we just want to essentially put in the text of what we're going to be counting down from. And actually we'll make it so that we check to see if the timer controller is not animating. Then what we can do here is put in timer controller.duration.inInits. So we can directly put in the duration of the controller itself, then the duration of the controller string in seconds. Hopefully you guys can still see this, even though it's really vertical. This needs to be duration. Duration in seconds, mod 60. Then I'll toString on this. String. I'll call pad left so that it has 2 zeros next to it. So that it's always 2 zeros rather. The pad left with 2 and then string of 0. And then, alright, so if the controller is not animating, we get the timer controller duration in minutes and seconds. And then, copy this. And then if it is animating, we want to use the duration that we created just a moment ago. So I'll just replace this timer controller piece with duration. And then get rid of this duration piece. And now, as you can see here, we've got our countdown timer. We need to, of course, align it. And as I add minutes, for instance, you can see here I'm adding 4 minutes. Now it's countdown 4, 0. And as I add seconds, that also changes the value as well. So, and then when we actually hit the play button, it will show us the actual countdown timer. You guys got any questions or anything while I'm doing this? You guys are pretty quiet. Well, it's not a problem. You guys can be as quiet as you want to be. I'm sure my soothing voice is helping you fall asleep right now. Or am I showing you my browser again? You guys just decided to leave. Alright, let's center this thing. So just, I guess we, that's a main axis alignment to the column here. Like that, just make it main axis centered. Now our countdown will. We might want to make these text items a little bit larger so that you guys can see them. So I'm actually going to add text styling. I guess font size. Make it 30.0 or something. That's a bit better. I'll do the same for the other text. Copy this. Yep. Yeah, that looks quite a bit better. And now you guys should be able to see what's going on. This a little bit better. Alright, so we've got most of our elements here. Now we just need to make it so that we can actually animate this thing. So we want to make a button, or rather a set of buttons, that will allow us to turn on the animation and also reset the animation. These buttons will be placed, I'm thinking, they're going to go underneath of the stack that we have here. So they go inside of the column here. So we call this timer button. And it should be capital. And it also needs the timer controller. This, I think, needs to be a hooked widget because it will have its state. Let's that real quick. I'm going to just use the normal functional widget annotation here rather than the alias. Then this is just called timer buttons is what I called it, I think. We just need to pass animation controller. Called timer controller. And so the state that we want here is we want to kind of have a state that will tell us whether or not this is being animated. We can kind of change the button state. Call it animated. Just use the useState function again. This will just be a Boolean value. Set it equal to false by default. And then I'll take the timer controller and add a status listener to it. What this does is it just listens for various statuses that are happening in the animation controller. So what we can do is check to see if the status value is equal to animation status, and we can check to see if it's completed or status is equal to animation status dismissed. And if either of those comes back as true, then we can call timer controller reset to reset controller, comma here, or not. It's not folding, whatever. And we can also change this animated value that we just created to false. So when it's animating, it'll be true, and we can change that. We'll change that down below. When you click the button, it'll turn it to true. And then once the animation properly ends, or if it's dismissed, it will automatically convert this back to false. So let's now return the actual widget part of this. I'm going to use a button bar because we'll have two buttons inside this. Give it some alignment, some main axis alignment, centered. And we'll have some material buttons in here. We could have icon buttons. Actually, that might be a better idea. So, you know what? Keep them as material buttons. I'll make this one a deep orange. Get an on press. For now, I just want to see what it looks like visually. So, empty on pressed. Both of these, and then color. One will make some purple accent. Colors like that. Like some errors here. Where are those errors coming from? Oh, this is outside of the column, that's why. Let me reset this thing, and I'll bring it back into view. But as it is right now, we've got this error going on, but good update here. Let's see. Build function return null. Offending function is timer buttons. Functions never return null. Okay, well, it shouldn't return null because it's returning the button bar. Or yeah, no, there's a problem because I never closed the status listener. So this is being returned inside of the status listener by accident. I think. Let's see. This needs another bracket. Yeah. So that looks a lot nicer. We've got our buttons here. And we've got the two sliders here. So nice and colorful. We also, of course, want some like child. I guess we'll put like an icon on here. So icons. This one will be, I guess, the play arrow, and then the other one could be like, I don't know, the reset arrow or something. I don't know what there is as far as reset goes. Apparently there's no reset icon. What about redo? Will that work? Alright. See, did I bring those back into the screen? Alright, so that looks decent, I think. Yeah, that's because I took the emulator away because it was mostly just errors. So I brought it back now because it's actually building the application. If it was just errors until we were building out the actual, now we have all the widgets here, so everything's actually working properly. All right, so now let's actually add the logic here. So see, for the first button, sorry, my phone just went off. All right, so I'm thinking for the first button, this is the play button, right? So we need to check to see if this thing is animating. Do that with the is animating boolean. Let's see. If it is animating, then we want to stop it. This will also be the play and the stop function. The animated value to false in here. Then if it's not animating, we can call timer controller timer controller forward to push it forward. We're going to go from timer controller value equals 0.0 or 1.0, or rather if it equals 0.0, then we want to add 1.0. We want to reverse it. Otherwise, we want to have the timer controller. And then down below this, we'll have animated value equals true. And we can now use this animated value to change the icon of this particular button. So animated value true or false, then we'll have icons.stop if it's true. Otherwise, we'll have our play button, play arrow if it's false. So if the animation is going and we want it to show a stop button, if it's not going, then we want it to show a play button. Let's see real quick if this works. So I'll put it to like 5 seconds, hit play, and there we go. So it's counting down. Looks nice and smooth. And of course the button changes from a play to a stop button. And now let's add the logic for the other material button. So just check to see if the timer controller is animating. Bracket. And we'll just say timer controller. Use the cascade operator. Put it true. We want to stop it, and then we want to reset this thing. We'll use the cascade operator for both of those. And again, we can take this animated value and set it equal to false. All right. So let's, I guess we can put like 8 minutes on the timer. I click this, then resets it. And now I can choose another time, say 2 minutes and 5 seconds. And while it's animating, I can't move these. I can't change these values, which is kind of important, because if I could, then it would actually change the number inside of here. Alright, so I think this is actually done for the most part. I mean, we could make it look a little bit nicer and add a few more things to it if we wanted to. Actually, my voice is getting pretty hoarse at this point. Yeah, we probably should hire a designer. I'm not exactly an aesthetic person. Alright guys, well, we've been gone for about an hour and a half. That seems about a good place to stop, I think. So what I'll do is I'll commit this up to GitHub. You guys can take a look at it, of course. Let's just call this a timer. Commit them. And let's push it up here. So the main reason why I did this particular tutorial, like this actual project, is because there were a few people who are asking me, how would you like add a variable, a way to like change the actual timer to, you know, rather than keeping it at 10 seconds. Because the original project, it was just a static 10 seconds. You click a button, then it would count down. Actually, that's a bug right there. If I click the play button and this is set to 0, then it will turn to stop. And I can now move it. Of course, it should go back to normal after the fact. But yeah, that's something that I would probably want to fix if I was going to actually push this out, some kind of production application. But, you know, for now, it's perfectly fine. It's this example. Any of you guys got any questions or comments you want to give me before I sign off? You want a lap button? That actually wouldn't be too hard to add. You could just, so let me show you real quick. With an animation controller, you can change the way, the behavior of the controller. So, the general behavior is just, the normal behavior is just to play the animation and then stop. But you can change the behavior to something like controller should be like let's see, animation behavior. Here we go. You can set this something else. Well, I wouldn't do it right here. Obviously, you can't. This is not a setter, but if you use animation behavior.preserve, then what it'll do is it'll keep looping. And so what we could do is change the controller with some kind of button to preserve, and then it should just keep going over and over and over and over and over. So if you set it to like 10 seconds, it'll do 10 seconds over and over. Then we'd have some kind of text to mark the amount of laps that we've gone through. Now, hopefully that gave you a good idea of what you could do to add a lap button. Matthew Chalt has donated $1 and he says, thank you, Tensor. Very interesting libraries. Can't imagine I could use it with Block. You actually could use it with Block because Block is obviously not a widget. You know, Block is just a normal class. I'd say that the functional widget would be a little bit, you know, it would be a little tricky, but you could do it. But I mean, that's why hooks are kind of a big part of this library. Now, hooks on their own are a state management solution. You don't really need a block. and you could actually just you do everything using the Flutter Hooks library. Fairly elegant. I'm actually pretty impressed at this state management solution. In fact, I'll probably do a official tutorial on it later. When's my next live coding session going to be? I suspect I'm going to do it sometime next week, but I haven't really decided when yet. Probably Wednesday or Thursday. Is it real to make Android Wear TV app using Flutter? I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't really looked into it myself, but I don't see why not. Maybe not yet, but I suspect that they would add the platform eventually. Would I consider making a video of an existing feature made with the block pattern, or change the implementation to using hooks, maybe like a search? Not really sure what you mean. I guess an existing project and adding in the block pattern. I guess I could do that. I could certainly do that for another live stream at some point. How would it find your stream controller inside of my block and dispose it? Well, you could still use a provider inside of one of these functions, and you could use the provider to dispose of the block. Or you could define the block as some kind of global variable or inside of a hook and then call block.dispose directly on it. There are really a lot of different choices for that. All right, guys. Well, I think that's it. If you guys don't have any more questions, I'll probably close down the stream now. Thank you guys for being here, and sorry about earlier when I accidentally showed my browser for a good 10 minutes or whatever. But hopefully after that, the stream actually got better. I'm new to this still, so I guess some issues are bound to happen like that. Let me actually open up the chat so that people can see what's going on. I don't know why it's not scrolled down properly. Well, I guess that's a mystery for next time. No, thank you, Akos. Hopefully I said your name right. Alright guys, well, oh yes. Before I close out the stream, I wanted to mention that I was thinking of doing live streams for like tutorials. So like say I make like a tutorial video. Like say I do something on like Flutter Hooks, like as like a normal tutorial. Then like the next day I have a live stream, you guys can come in and ask questions to me directly, and maybe we can fiddle around with the project. So like these code reviews in the live stream, I'm thinking that might be an interesting way to use this format. I'm not sure if you guys are interested in such a thing. Also, of course, I want to do live courses and pair programming through this live stream format as well. And, that's forthcoming. It's definitely going to happen fairly soon. I'm thinking maybe in a few weeks here, but we'll see. But yeah, so I'm thinking these code reviews might be interesting for some of the more advanced projects. Obviously, I wouldn't do it for every tutorial, but for some of the more advanced ones, worth doing. So you guys let me know if you like the idea or not. Seems a few of you do. Seems a few of you are a little skeptical on it, which is fine. You guys can always comment on this video later. All right, so Nilish is for it. Oh, that's good to know. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to close out. So thanks for coming to the stream, and you guys have a good day, or a good night, or a good morning, wherever you are. And I'll see you in the next one, and in the next tutorial.